join in, they can join in. First of all, thank you guys for all showing up to this webinar. Hopefully we can, hopefully I can be able to teach you a little bit about pre-fishing a spot you've never even fished without leaving your house. The goal today is for us to have a couple places in mind for when you get to the boat ramp on that first day, and hopefully that'll save you a little bit of time when you're out on the water, help you catch more fish instead of search for more fish. My name is Mike Readling. I'm one of the Navionics marine specialists here in Florida. I grew up in Jupiter, fishing the inlet and catching all the snook that still live down there. Fished the intercoastal my whole life and all the way up and down the Loxahatchee River. Now I live in Jensen Beach. I used to be a full-time guy, but I've scaled that back to part-time because I've got too many other jobs, like doing webinars on a Monday night. One of the perks of my jobs is the opportunity for me to travel all around the state and be able to squeeze in some fishing wherever I end up for that night or for the weekend, or depending on what I'm doing. Because of that, I end up in some crazy places: Chokoloskee, Steinhatchee, Flamingo, places that I've maybe have fished before with a guide, but probably never fished before, certainly never fished on my own. And since I'm only there for a day or two, I want to make sure that I can maximize my time on the water, cast my lures in the spots where hopefully they get the right amount of action. Now there's a bunch of ways to try to figure out where to fish, but the one I like the most, that's proven to be the most effective for me, and I've talked to a lot of professional tournament anglers, and they use the same thing. It's the Navionics boating app, either on my iPad or on my Galaxy S5 phone. I'm always amazed, you know, we go to boat shows and we do a bunch of different appearances all over, but how many people will come up to me at a show, see the iPad that I'm, you know, showing people the app on, and tell me how they use it either before they go fishing or when they're out on the water, or, you know, just in general how they like to use the app. So a good example of that, a couple weeks ago I was in Ocala at a boat show, and 3 anglers who had just gotten done with the Bassmaster Classic in South Carolina came over and told me how they used it to pre-fish the Bassmaster Classic. A few minutes later, Rick Murphy and Jeffrey Page were given a seminar, and part of their seminar was how they used the Navionics app when they were fishing the IFA Redfish Championships in Louisiana last year. They wound up winning $50,000 in that tournament, and a big part of Rick's presentation was how he used the Navionics app and the chip in his boat to find an efficient route through the backcountry of Louisiana so that he could make a long run to where he knew fish were and not have to stop for fuel and waste a bunch of time, which was a pretty interesting use of the different ways that you can use the app. But for our purposes tonight, I wanted to talk about using that Navionics app to find fish, or at least try to figure out where fish should be before you even hook up the trailer to your truck. I live in Jensen Beach. That's why there's a big triangle right there in Jensen Beach. And this area has quickly gotten the reputation as being the big snook capital of Florida. You know, during the summer months, you can pretty consistently catch 30-pounders, occasionally have a 40-pounder mixed in if you fish the right spots and the right times. And it's a spot where, if nothing else, there's a lot of snook in this area. And it's something that every guide trip that I've had, everybody's wanted snook, at least one snook, and then move on to other fish. One of the spots that everybody fishes is in this area is the Hole in the Wall, which is in the St. Lucie Inlet, on the south side of the St. Lucie Inlet. It's a wooded beach with a little bit of drop-off. If you zoom in, you can see the shoreline, and you can see the well, let's get to the right part first here. There we go. You can see the shoreline. You can see the contour lines. In this case, you can see how the lines kind of go from 2 feet to 6 feet, 2 to 19 to 7, 2 to 9 to 17, sorry. So that tells me that that's a nice little ledge right up against that shoreline. And also, anyway. Now there are 3 things that I look for when I'm fishing for snook that will apply to anywhere snook are going to be caught: current, a drop-off, and woods along the shoreline, or some sort of cover. If you look at the data of where the majority of the snook are caught around South Florida, you'll see the number of snook caught in an area is directly proportional to the amount of mangroves in that area. Snook love mangroves. So from my experience, both in St. Lucie and up the Loxahatchee and St. Lucie rivers, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm looking for when I want to go look for snook. I want to look for where the current's flowing, one way or the other, in or out. I want to look to find out where those mangroves are, where there's cover for the snook to hide. I like to ambush their prey. And then I like to find a nice little drop-off, a little ledge where they can sit kind of low and come up and hit those bait fish. Now for today's purposes, we're going to head west a little bit, and I'm going to talk about an area that I've never really fished, but if I was going to go fishing there this weekend or this Wednesday, what I would look for and why I would look for that. Over in Punta Gorda, it's a very interesting area. So remember, the three things we're looking for are current, drop-off, and cover. So right off the bat, if you look here in Charlotte Harbor, you can see the Peace River empties into Charlotte Harbor, comes right over here towards Lemon Bay, kind of like this. If I zoom in a little bit more on this app, you can see the nice shoreline right across from where the Peace River hits. So we know that there's a decent amount of flow coming from the Peace River. We know that when the tide's coming out, that river is going to be flowing right into this shoreline. The next thing we want to look for is mangroves and cover. So I'm going to go to the map options part of the Navionics app, click on map options, and then click on the satellite overlay. What that shows me is a whole shoreline full of mangroves with two little creeks feeding into it, incidentally. So I've got my flow, I've got my shoreline. Looks like from the satellite feed there's a bunch of mangroves along that shoreline, or at least some cover that goes into the water. So we're 2/3 of the way there. The next thing I want is a little bit of slope. Now if you look at the contour lines on this map, you can see that it goes from 1 foot out to 3 feet to 7 to 9. Now it's not as dramatic a drop as what we were looking at Hole in the Wall, but it's still a decent little ledge. So it's something that I would look at as far as being able to hold fish, which is great for the outgoing tide. This is a good spot for the outgoing tide, but what about if the tide's coming in? If you look just across the river, I'm going to zoom out for a minute. But if you look right across the river, you'll see Hog Island, right there with Shoal Point on the south part of it. Also, with the satellite overlay, you can see there's a lot of mangroves and a lot of cover there on Hog Island, which is the other thing we're looking for. And there's another ledge coming off of Hog Island. So what happens is when the water's flowing back in, when the tide's coming back in, all our bait is going to get pushed up against Hog Island and get caught in this little trough and this little ledge. If you notice, the ledge kind of extends up Hog Island a little bit, which creates kind of a highway, which is where this fish, especially the snook and redfish, will sit and be able to ambush their prey as they head up and down that ledge along the island. So I would position my boat somewhere outside that 10-foot area to where I can cast into 3 or 4 feet and then retrieve my bait back towards me across the deeper part of that trough, letting the fish come up and attack them. If no fish are biting there, just let your boat kind of drift a little bit north with the tide and just fish that trough the whole way up. While we're sitting here talking about these contour lines, And before I get back to the tides and how important tides are, I want to talk about these contour lines because they're very important. Every line on here is a 1 foot contour going either up or down. In this case, it's going from 1 to 10, so we know that's about a 9 foot drop. Now, these contour lines are the results of sonar scans that are uploaded to Navionics, which then uses the data to update their charts. So if you're out fishing, or if I'm out fishing, you can do sonar scans, upload that data to Navionics, and within about a week, the charts will change. You'll see, if this hole changes or if the contours on that hole changes, you will see that on your charts, which is very important, especially in an area like Charlotte Harbor or any of the other kind of shallow harbors along Florida's coast, because tides change, tides allow inlets and harbors to shoal in, storms come and change that whole thing. So the ability for me to go on to this app, download the latest, freshest data, and then put it on my iPad is vital when I'm taking my boat to a place I've never been and when I'm fishing flats that are 1 and 2 feet deep. It's something that every boater should be able to have and be able to do. Also, if you don't like your sonar charts so closely bunched, you can manipulate that on the app by going to Map Options and clicking on the sonar chart density. You can click it from very high down to high, down to medium. And as you click down, you see they disappear and they get fewer and far between, all the way to low where they disappear completely. Personally, I like my sonar charts density high. I like to know where the contours are. I want to know how tight those drops are, how big those holes are, and I want to be able to find the fish that way. Back to tides real quick. I know we were talking about that a minute ago. When it comes to tides here in Jensen Beach, I just, get in the boat, run past the first channel marker, and see which way the water's flowing. I know enough spots around here that I can make the decision where I want to go fish on the fly and kind of figure it out while we're headed there. But in this case, this is, Charlotte Harbor, a place I don't fish a lot or ever, and I want to know which way the water's going to be flowing. In this case, you can go to the Weather and Tides tab on the map options. It'll ask you what area you want tides for. We'll go up here a little bit. And it will show you the tides from the nearest tide station. If you click on that, you're going to get a tide chart right at the bottom of your screen. And what you can do is kind of slide through that with your finger and see what time the high tides, what time the low tides are. If you want to fish Tuesday at 4 o'clock, it's going to give you a decent idea of what the tide's going to be doing Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Again, very important for trying to decide where you want to fish and which side, in this case, which side of the harbor you want to be fishing on. So we're going to close that out. All right. So back to the map real fast. We have our first area picked out. We're going to try to fish either Hog Island or the shoreline across from Hog Island. But anybody who fishes a lot knows you need to have a backup or 2 or 3 or 4. So we want to go look for another spot to fish. In this case, I'm going to scroll a little bit south. We're going to go through the harbor, down through Matlacha Pass. And we're going to come to where the Caloosahatchee River dumps out into Charlotte Harbor. Now this is, Caloosahatchee is one of the big rivers that flows all the way from Lake Okeechobee all the way through to the harbor. So there's plenty of water coming out of that, especially when they're dumping the lake. So we're going to have our current. We still have the satellite overlay on in this case. So we're going to look down here towards Big Sister Key, which is the key just off the tip of Buttonwood Cove there. And as you can see, there's the channel coming out from the lake. There's the channel just to the south of Big Sister Key, right here and here. But we don't want to fish the channel. We're going to be fishing a little bit closer to the shoreline, up here, and up in here. Now, I know I said mangroves provide the best opportunity for finding snook, and that's true, even down in this part of the area. But this is Florida, and in the last 50 years, 50% of the state's mangroves have been destroyed because people building gigantic houses, seawalls, and long docks. Now, that's not perfect for everything we're looking for as far as snook go, but snook do like cover, and docks provide cover. So, as you can see, there's a neighborhood that's built in next to these mangroves along the shoreline here. And we're going to look at the contours that we have. We see we've got mangroves. We know we've got flow coming from the Caloosahatchee. And we've got mangroves, and then we've got some docks. So we're going to have plenty of opportunities to look for snook. It's going to be a matter of if they're biting that day and if they're biting what we've got. But so we've already picked our first spot. So we want, and this is going to be the second spot, but we might not remember where we're going, or we might not remember exactly where that second spot is. So we're going to drop a pin using the app. And in that case, you can get the crosshairs on your screen, push the little question mark button next to the crosshairs, and then hit on where it says marker. And then click add. That's going to drop a pin right next to Big Sister Key. So when we're done fishing out all the redfish and trout up around Hog Island, we can head south to our next spot, and we know exactly where the next spot's going to be. This is a big, dropping markers is big for me, not necessarily inshore, but when I go offshore and, we stumble across some rocks on our bottom plotter, or we, catch a couple grouper or a couple snapper off of a wreck. That's somewhere we're going to want to go back. So I always make sure to drop a pin in that area. Speaking of snapper and grouper, while we're on the subject, there's one more thing I want to quickly run through before we finish up. This is something I've used a couple of times, especially when we're looking for fish in a certain area, or we've heard of fish in a certain depth. We're going to go back on over to the East Coast, over to my spot. I've got actually have a trip booked in the next couple of weeks for people that want snook and they want a cobia, which makes things a little bit more difficult, but we'll see what we can do. In my area recently, we've heard the cobia are swimming in the 40 to 60 foot range, swim mostly on the manta rays that are migrating through the area. If you see a big ray, always throw a jig at it. There's usually at least one cobia, if not more, right around it. So the charter that I have booked said they want to catch a snook, and they want to go after a cobia. They don't care what order it comes in. They just want to go home with 2 different kinds of meat in the cooler. So we already know that we're going to be fishing hole in the wall because everybody fishes hole in the wall. If you're looking for snook in Stewart, you may as well go to hole in the wall, join the crowd. So we're going to start at hole in the wall. But what I want to do before I start the trip is figure out which way the tide's going so that I can manage the cobia and the snook all at the same time. So we're going to check our, So we're going to check our tides. Not that one. And the trip is going to be Wednesday, so we're going to scroll along the bottom till Wednesday. And we can see that high tide is right around noon on Wednesday. So ideally, the last 60 to 90 minutes of the outgoing tide is the perfect time to fish hole in the wall. So we know that's going to be, judging by this chart right here, the last 90 minutes of the outgoing tide is going to be about 4:30 or so until 6. So that means we're going cobia fishing first. So like I said, cobia have been in the 40 to 60 foot range is what everybody's telling me. So we're going to go to map options again. We're going to go to the little tab called fishing range. And we're going to move those buttons to where the one is at 60, the other is at 40. One, we'll give them a foot. And if you look at the chart, you get a big white area. This is the 40 to 60 foot corridor that I want to be fishing. So when I'm on my boat, if I have the iPad app out, I want to make sure that my boat with the little red triangle is within this white area as we cruise around looking for manta rays. Hopefully we can catch a couple cobia or two by about 3 o'clock, 3:30. Head back into hole in the wall and finish off with our snook. The best part about that trip is we just did all of my planning while I'm sitting here on a computer playing on an iPad. And that's really the whole key of what we're trying to do with the iPad app, with the Navionics app on the iPad, is be able to sit at your dinner table, look at the app, find the contours, find the current where you're going, and put together a fishing trip before you even get to the ramp. Hopefully, this has given you some kind of an idea of what to do. If anybody has any questions, I will unmute you all and you can all ask questions. Maybe. Jessica, do you have a question? Jessica, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if when you added a point on the map, what happens if you put edit map instead of add point?
You're talking about right here? Sorry, there's a little lag. All right, so what she's asking is instead of adding just a regular push pin drop looking thing, if you wanted to mark that spot as a wreck, or if there's a buoy that's not on your chart that you want to put on your map, there's the opportunity to put a buoy or a beacon or lights, anything. These are called community edits. It's open to everybody. And you can also go through, put ports and anchor, ports and marinas. Whatever you want to put in that spot, you can put anywhere on the map. I've done a couple wrecks offshore that I want to go back to fish later. I know some other people have marked some buoys. So that's the options if you want to do edit map, or you can do a different kind of marker, like a push pin. Thank you, Jessica. Any other questions? I hear no questions. All right, if we have no questions, I will say thank you, everybody, for showing up. Hopefully we learned something.
I got a question for you.
John, no.
Can you tell fuel can you tell fuel prices?
No, you cannot tell fuel prices. You have to go on your phone gas finder app for that.
We'll talk later.
Are you good?
You can.
I know you can. Any other questions? I hear none. Why do we have? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Hey, Mike.